I'm Harry Binswanger, the HB in HBTV. Today we're taking up artificial intelligence. Is it something to be worried about, or is there, as I'm going to argue, a philosophical mistake, two of them, in the worries about AI? Now, what is AI? Basically, it's a way of structuring software to accomplish tasks by mobilizing information, they call it the training, from other sources. And it works by a kind of evolutionary principle of adjusting output closer and closer to the value that's set by the programmer as the quote goal of the software. So for instance, you can demonstrate that very unlikely strings of words like existence exists in the act of grasping that implies two corollary axioms can be produced in a very small number of trials of individually random shufflings of the alphabet. If you keep in each position of that long string the random outcomes that are closer to your target. So you set in existence exists, etc. And if the first, you have a starting value, let's say it's N G space R, anything, but suppose the first letter is N, and you shuffle the deck, so to speak, and let's suppose the next time the first letter is X. Well, you don't keep that. But if the next time, instead of N, the next letter is A, you would keep that because A is closer to E than N is. And that experiment then, or that reshuffling is evaluated for all the positions in the target sentence, and it converges by a series of random changes into the desired target sentence in much more quickly. I mean, when I say much more, to get it by just starting over again each time and shuffling the letters, including the space symbol, and randomly assigning a new string, it would take the entire history of the universe, as far as, the scientists assign a number to it. Let's say it would take billions and billions and billions of years, hundreds of billions, if there are that many years, to come up with a string that you can come up with in a few seconds, in maybe 300 trials. I've done this program, I've written a little basic program that demonstrates it. So it's very effective at, the software can be very effective at reaching a pre-designed target. Now, obviously it gets much more involved than that and much more developed than that, but the two things remain the same, that there has to be some value that's set as the target. And it's set as a target by the human programmer. And that it has to have access to a whole lot of data. In my example, it generates that data from random trials with the alphabet. But it has to be fed in the alphabet, and there has to be a table of random numbers that it has access to. But in real AI and what they call machine learning, it would have access to the internet. It would have access to the same thing you do when you Google material. And as you know, some of that material just isn't true. But by and large, the great bulk of it is true. And the untrue stuff generally tends to get counteracted or countermanded by more definitive true stuff. I remember when Wikipedia started, people said, how can you expect anything of this? It's completely ridiculous. People write their own encyclopedia entries, and then they're counting upon collective brain to edit it. Well, it turns out if you're not dealing with highly controversial subjects where ideology enters the law, you can that way get a lot of definitive knowledge, and it turns out to be a very valuable resource. I myself have edited entries on Wikipedia to make them factually accurate, and they have certain procedures built in for human correction of what's, I shouldn't say human because the opposite is a machine here, for other people to correct what some wise guy puts up there. And in general, artificial intelligence is capable of sifting through a lot of possibilities and doing things that are very, very helpful. You can just imagine the consequences for medicine, where there are many, many possible drugs that could be given to treat a given disease. And it's too many for clinical trials to be done, but through simulations of biological systems of the human body and knowing the structure of the chemical, AI can find the promising ones. It can't determine, that something will be a cure or a treatment, but it can narrow down the possibility from astronomical to 3 or 4. Not that those are the only ones. When I say narrow down, it's not the others are ruled out, but these are the most promising. Artificial intelligence is used in autonomous vehicles, which is something that will be staggeringly wonderful when it occurs. Not only could it mean the end of traffic, because vehicles can platoon with 6 inches between them and move as a unit, but it will be far safer because we don't have to worry about people falling asleep at the wheel or getting in drunk. A staggering percentage of accidents occur because of those 2 causes. Those will be eliminated. And of course, you won't have to own a car. Now, I'm going to want to own a car because I have a car to which I'm emotionally attached. But those who don't want to keep their car idle, most of the time, the huge investment that everybody makes, well, most everybody, in a vehicle that sits idle 98% of the time. How much of your life are you driving your car? 24 hours. How much of it? Very little. I'm saying 2%. I don't know what the percentage is on average. But if you can avail yourself of robot taxis, which are constantly circling, like Ubers without drivers that are constantly available, you don't need to have a garage. And think of the cost to society not that society bears the cost. Let's say the aggregate cost to each of us, our share of the aggregate decrease of production due to the capital, the savings that are tied up in cars that are sitting idle most of the time. So you could reduce the number of pounds of steel and copper and aluminum and carbon fiber and plastics that are tied up in automobiles by a factor of 50, That's a tremendous gain in productivity. That capital is then available to do other things. So the potential, that's just one little area, autonomous vehicle, two little areas, medicine and autonomous vehicles, but those together, just those two, have the potential to revolutionize human life for the better. Okay, but what about the problem we're discussing here? Many people think that this technology could get loose and destroy humanity. It's possible that some rogue guy, some human being, could program in a super destructive set of instructions to some computers. And they could do a lot of damage. But so can a steam shuttle. So can a car. So can a gun. So can dynamite. But it would be a big mistake to ban those things because they can be misused. I remember a cartoon I saw as a teenager that impressed me a lot. It showed two cavemen women talking in the foreground and two cavemen males in the background looking at a fire that they had obviously just made. And the women are one saying to the other, I don't care what they say. Someday that thing will get loose and burn down the world. Well, AI is like that. It has benefits. It's not going to get loose and burn down the world any more than fire did. But it is possible that people can use fire in destructive ways. It's possible that people can use AI in destructive ways. That's not really the fear. Because let me tell you why the rogue human goal setter is not the real fear. You can use AI to counteract that. The decent people who don't want the human race extinguished have the same power that the rogue has, only there's many more of them and many more machines that they control. So whatever strength he gains through AI, the rest of us who don't want to see humanity wiped out or mass murder, whatever it is, have, I don't know, 100,000 times. There's 100,000 of us for every one of them. So if AI is very effective, okay, we'll use it to stop the rogue users, and we'll build in, early warning signals. No, the fear comes from two philosophical errors, both of them represented in what if it gets super smart and develops a will of its own and wants to kill us? We're creating this thing, they say, that has a mind of its own and desires of its own, and what's to stop it from taking into its mind that it wants to destroy humanity? Well, what stops it is it doesn't have a mind, and it doesn't have a will, and it doesn't have desires, and it can't. I looked at the website of one expert in this area. I'm going to share my screen. This is, I hope you now see it. No, I didn't hit share yet. Okay, there it is. This is a website of Yoshua Bengio. I don't know who are the experts in this field, but it says here, recognized worldwide as one of the leading experts in artificial intelligence, Yoshua Bengio is most known for his pioneering work in deep learning, earning him the 2018 AM Turing Award, the, quote, Nobel Prize of Computing, with Geoffrey Hinton and Yann LeCun. He is a full professor at Université de Montréal and the founder and scientific director of Mila Quebec AI Institute. And it goes on with other. He was awarded the Killam Prize in 2022, Royal Society of London, Knight of the Legion of Honor, France. I mean, it just goes on. So this is not some kook. And he says in here, I don't think you can read it. I think it's too small. Hypothesis 1, he has 3 hypotheses. It's right down here. If you can read it, I'm going to read it for you. If you can't, human level intelligence is possible because brains are biological machines. Human level intelligence is possible because brains are biological machines. No. I mean, unless you want to say human level intelligence is possible because people have hands. Human level intelligence is possible because people have kidneys. There are many things that are possible, that are necessary conditions that make something possible. Brains are biological machines, but minds are not machines. Brains do a lot of work for the mind. I think what we call the subconscious, for those of us who use that term, is a brain function. It's the brain's ability to store and resupply information. But the mind is not the brain. Now, he goes on to say, rejecting hypothesis 1, right here, if you can see it at this size. Rejecting hypothesis 1 would require either some supernatural ingredient, right? I don't want that. I'm not saying there's something beyond the brain and supernatural behind our intelligence, or rejecting computational functionalism. I'm going to do that. The hypothesis that our intelligence and even our consciousness can be boiled down to causal relationships and computations that at some level are independent of the hardware substrate. The basic hypothesis behind computer science and its notion of universal Turing machines. No, it is not the basic hypothesis behind computer science and the Turing machine. Is put together 2 things: computations, of which the Turing machine shows the most simple prerequisites of being able to compute, and consciousness is independent of the hardware substrate. In other words, you can have consciousness without our brain. You only need something that does something similar to what our brains do. Oh, yeah. Yeah, something similar, but not what some other machine does. So what some other biological entity does. Yeah, there could be aliens on another planet that are not Homo sapiens, but have evolved as living organisms, a consciousness, including a conceptual faculty. And that conceptual faculty will have to have some way of physically encoding information and interacting with the body of the alien. Yeah, I can't rule out other kinds of species of biological organisms that are intelligent, that are conceptual. But you can't say, because computers can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, or do something that interpreted by a human being is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, then consciousness is independent of the organism. Actually, computers can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Computers cannot compute. We use computers to aid our computation. There's no ones and zeros inside the computer. There are high voltages and low voltages. In principle, it could be done with a set of waterworks inside with high water levels and low water levels that would be digitized. You could do the same thing that you do in a computer, only it would be about 1 billion times slower, and gates that would open and let the high water flow out to the low water. Computers shunt around electric current. They charge and discharge capacitors. That's all that's going on inside the computer. When we call it adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, even that is not literally true. That's how we interpret the input and output of high and low voltages. Do books contain knowledge? Well, in a sense, yes, but in a sense, no. If all the human readers of books died, there wouldn't be any knowledge in the books. There would just be ink marks on paper. And in the same way, if all the human users of computers died, if there were no human users, but the electricity kept going somehow, all the lit up pixels and all the printing out printers and all the control systems that are controlling would be doing nothing. I mean, they would be continuing to do physical processes, but they wouldn't constitute adding or writing or language or control. It would just be cause and effect, physical action and reaction. To call it, it's simpler in your fingers. Do your fingers add? Look, 2, 2, 4. Did my fingers add? No. Does your pencil write words? Does your pencil think? No. You use your pencil, you use your computer with its arrangement of physical parts to produce helpful output that you can then interpret in a certain way, but uninterpreted, it's just lit up pixels, ink on paper, temperature, let's say it's a car turning left or turning right, but no driver. The driver's dead and there are no human beings. So until the gas runs out, the car can be going down the road and it may, under some, circumstances, turn right. It's not intelligent. It's just the same as if a rock falls down a hill. It's simple mechanical cause and effect. So yes, I reject that hypothesis. And it is not true that any machine can be built that is even conscious, let alone conceptually conscious. So the way I like to put this is, before you could build a computer that can think, a computer can think on its own, not manipulate pixels and ink particles so that you are able to store your thoughts and recombine them, but is able to think on its own. Before it could think, it would have to perceive. And before it could perceive, it would have to sense. So before you could have a computer that could think, you'd have to have a computer that could feel the world. Now, I don't mean sense in the loose sense, where they say, oh, its camera is a sensor. No, it's not. It's the physical equivalent of a sensor. It would have to experience inside itself what we experience when we look at something. And in order to have goals, you would have to have pleasure and pain. And you can't think without goals. So before a computer could think, it would have to be able to feel pleasure and pain. Now, how are you going to do that? How are you going to make it? Oh, I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. No, what you've got is a simulation of thinking, a simulation of perceiving. I don't think anyone's tried to make a simulation of pleasure and pain. Consciousness arises out of living beings, living organisms. Not all living organisms are conscious, of course. Plants aren't conscious. Probably the lower animals, well, certainly the lower animals, because they include things like yeast cells. They're animals in the, the technical biological meaning. So before you could have a computer that thinks, you'd have to have a computer that's alive. Now, to show you that I'm not doing anything supernatural here, I'm not calling upon the supernatural. Yeah, it would be possible to build a computer that's alive, only then it wouldn't be a computer. It's possible to create life. Eventually, we'll do that. We'll create life in a proverbial test tube. Probably won't be in the test tube, but we'll create something that can grow and it will be a living organism. Conceivably, it could be made, evolved enough to be conscious. I can't rule that out. I don't know what in living organisms gives them the power to feel pleasure and pain, to perceive the environment, and then to abstract. For the one species they can. So the philosophic error is thinking if you can simulate something, that means that something is hardware independent. It's really a materialistic view of consciousness. People don't really appreciate consciousness as awareness, as experience. They are aware of it when they get hurt, when they hit their thumb with a hammer. They're very aware of consciousness. Keep that in mind when you think of the computer. But there's a second error. So like a materialistic view that denies consciousness and sees it as only functional, a computational functionalism, that is a crazy view. That's one error. The other error is what I wrote my doctoral thesis and then first book about. And let me get that up on my screen and share it. I hope you're now seeing my book, The Biological Basis of Teleological Concept. The biological basis of teleological concepts. In order to have goals.
Sorry, Dr. Binswanger, you're showing your other screen, perhaps?
Wrong screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me go back. There, this one. How's that?
Looks good.
Okay. This is my first book. Based on an idea I got in 1966 and wrote my doctoral thesis on 1973. And this book based on it was published in the late 80s, about 88. It's, as you can see, I'm on Amazon, so you can go on Amazon and get it. In this book, I show how goal-directed action presupposes, it's really Ayn Rand's point, presupposes an entity facing an alternative of its existence or non-existence, in the face of which it has to act to attain the things that you're calling its goal. Only in that case do you get action dependent upon survival. And survival is dependent upon action. So you get, if you look, maybe I can zoom in here a little bit. Too little. I can't go beyond that for some reason. Maybe up here I can. Let's try that. Okay. I hope you can see over here where my cursor is, there's a couple of arrows in a circle like a dog chasing its tail. That is the nature of goal-directed action. An action is taken that has certain consequences that fosters the survival of the agent and therefore its ability to perform that action and pass on the genes for that action to its offspring. So my thesis is that it's natural selection that has adapted the actions of organisms to end states conferring survival value. And that's what makes teleology, which is a technical term for goals, values, success, failure. That's what makes the whole phenomenon of acting in order to get something possible and necessary. Computers are doing what they're doing to serve us, not in order to serve themselves, because they have no needs. So it has no will, it doesn't care, nothing matters to the computer. If you assign it, as in my example, to retain certain results that reach the end you specify and throw out others, it will do that. If you have a self-driving car and you program it to avoid hitting something that might be an object or even a human being in its path to take certain corrective actions, it will do that, and AI can increase the efficacy in achieving that goal. But it's your goal. The computer doesn't care, the car doesn't care. So this whole fantasy of, well, what if they become super intelligent and naturally they'll then want to destroy us? Who wouldn't? If you were super intelligent, wouldn't you want to destroy the human race, the rest of it? Why? It can't become intelligent. It just becomes more, a better and better computer and a faster and faster, zeroing in on the goal that's set by the human designers. Now, let me give you one scenario to just nail this down. One site I visited, and it might have been Bengio, said, imagine this, that it sets as a goal developing a virus to wipe out the human race. Well, why would it do that? Suppose it's set to create a virus or a vaccine or something that will prevent people from getting melanoma. And it does, but it also kills everybody. So now it's zeroed in on what we set as its goal. But in the process, everybody that it comes in contact with kills. Well, there's so many questions about that. Like, how stupid is the programmer? And it's not just one programmer, it's the team. So you got a bunch of morons who can't see that a vaccine has to be safe as well as effective. And how does it make viri? I think that's the plural virus. Virus says, if it isn't, how does it make them? Is it given control of a chemical laboratory and given control of a factory with no conditions, no target to restrict it to things that are safe? I mean, it's just bizarre. You may have noticed that your computer doesn't have a factory. Now, somebody's out there saying, wait a minute, I have a 3D printer. And you think if your computer were really smart, somehow it would take that 3D printer while you're sleeping and give it instructions to make a little robot that would go turn itself on and protect you from flipping the switch? How is that going to work? How is it going to have the fuel to carry? I mean, it's a philosophical confession. It's not a view, the doomsday scenario. It's a confession of this. Hey, if I were 10 times smarter than everybody, I'd want to wipe them all out. I'd want to make them all into my slaves, maybe not kill them. But if I could outwit everybody on earth, I would want to become dictator. No, if you were that smart, you wouldn't want to become dictator. Look, we're smarter than dogs. Do we want to wipe out all dogs? Is that a project? Sure, we'd like to wipe out, we used to want to wipe out certain, mosquitoes and harmful things. But human beings are not harmful to computers. Why? If they could have desires, which they can't, why would they have a desire to destroy us? I mean, it's a projection of the lack of self-confidence and self-esteem and pleasure in one's own existence that imagines that they could have that if they ruled the world. So you remember the Mel Brooks line, it's good to be the king. No, it isn't good to be the king. It's bad to be the king. It's a life you wouldn't want. Thank you. I hope to see you not next week, but 2 weeks from today. Next week, I will be speaking at the Objectivist Conference in Miami on the philosophy of mathematics. And I'll be speaking at just about, in the same afternoon. I'll be speaking actually from 1 to 2:30, but I think it's a little tight. So I'm taking next Monday off, and 2 weeks from now, we'll resume probably with an Ask Harry Anything session. Until then, goodbye.